myself again. But it's the only way you're ever gonna learn. You look back and it's all in the past. I'm dwelling on the thoughts I cannot say to you. If I don't say the words, then maybe it's not true.
Good morning, welcome to NUFC Matters with me, Steve Wraith. And no, it's not a pre-record. Ben is live. Welcome, Ben. How are you?
I'm good. For anyone in doubt as to whether it's a pre-record or a live, just listen to the gravelly voice and look at the face, and you can tell that I'm straight out of bed and into a garden full of rain. I'm up in Edinburgh with a dog, sopping wet. So pure proof just by looking at the horrific face and the horrible voice that we are live.
And I presume you've gone to Edinburgh to celebrate Leicester scoring 5 goals and the return of Jamie Vardy, who I love watching Jamie Vardy. You know, I wish Newcastle had signed him a few years ago, because what a player to come from the non-league in late life, a bit like the Ian Wright story. But he's just prolific. There's nobody better at the moment. I think I put him ahead of Harry Kane for finishing opportunism. That's what he's all about. And the looping header yesterday is just Vardy at his best.
Yeah, and I think that we see it in flashes now, unfortunately, or have done this season. And part of that is down to Leicester chopping and changing and injuries. And by the way, if we want to get onto Newcastle, it was probably a bad idea to start with a 5-1 Leicester win, because I could talk about Vardy for the best part of an hour. But look, we score 5. Watford are very, very poor. But what I liked was that we come from behind, and in a game that doesn't mean a great deal to Leicester other than trying to jostle for position and prize money, they showed good character. And these types of games, Norwich as well for Leicester, where Vardy got a couple, although one was a little bit dubious because it took a thick deflection, but he'll claim it. They allow someone like him to just re-find his touch. And, you know, in 15-16, when Leicester won the Premier League, it wasn't just the fact that Vardy was a born finisher. It was totally innate. And I think that good finishers look at the goal in 2 ways. Some of them still use their eyesight to pick their spot, and others, especially if they kind of peel off defenders or play with their back to goal. Gary Lineker, another good example. They have to have that instinct just to know their bearings. And they are 2 different things. And a good player will do both naturally. So it's not one or the other. But that's what Vardy, at his absolute Leicester peak, used to be brilliant at. So if I think Robbie Fowler, let's say, or even Alan Shearer, then I often envisage a player that's running at pace with the ball, or is using their body and is guiding it into a spot. And the word precision comes to mind. And Vardy can be precise, but I think that his hallmark when we won the Premier League was more about just always hitting it cleanly and with power, and knowing virtually as if he had a blindfold on exactly where the goal was. But the spot's actually less important with Vardy. The deftness that perhaps Shearer showed at times, or the accuracy that Fowler had, Vardy has those qualities, and more than most in the Premier League. But it's just the fact that he knows where to run, getting into the right place at the right time. It's timing and it's power. So then when you see a kind of looping header like you referenced yesterday, it just shows you that he has that finesse and that deftness as well. And Leicester were great. And this is the Leicester that, when everyone's fit and confident, Brendan Rodgers can produce. And we've been a very Jekyll and Hyde team, partly due to injuries and partially down to a lack of defending. Set pieces have been absolutely dreadful for Leicester all season. So they've let themselves down at the back. But at their best, Leicester is still a kind of top 6 side on their day. And they're a team that could, at home especially, beat the likes of a Manchester City or a Liverpool or a Chelsea, who we've got next. So don't discount Leicester next season, because if they make a few savvy signings and people stay fit, then I think we'll continue to go forwards rather than backwards.
Yeah, going to be interesting. Let's get on to Newcastle then. And the first questions really that have come out on Twitter when we posted that you were coming on the show this morning are about the topic of conversation, about the leaked strips. And Rich Joblin said, are Newcastle at risk of shining an unnecessary spotlight on the Saudi ownership with this new kit? It created an absolute media frenzy. Is it needed? Or is because it's Newcastle United? Premier League would love us to trip up, wouldn't they? And that was followed up by Arnold, who said, why are the journalists creating a frenzy around an unconfirmed Newcastle third away strip, when those same journalists remained silent when Chelsea, Leicester, PSG all released strips in their own international colours. And of course, this is the big hoo-ha. This is what it's all about from our perspective. You know, a leaked...
One of those is the Newcastle kit?
Well, exactly. It's the one on the left. But, I mean, it's a leaked strip from an unknown, like an unqualified source. This hasn't come direct from the club. This has come from a couple of people on Twitter who, when you look at their profiles, don't really have any connection with anybody other than, their nearest and dearest. They're not people involved in strips, and they're not involved with Castori. They're not involved with Newcastle United, that we know. But ultimately, Ben, this kind of thing was always going to happen. And I think the point that Arnold makes is that, there wasn't a big, hoo-ha when other clubs have done this in the past. So why now with Newcastle?
And I think that's a fair point, or certainly topic of conversation, and we can delve into it from different angles. So the first thing, which is a key underlying point, is that the media are talking about it because, having seen the leak, we've gone to sources at Newcastle and been able to confirm that this is their plan. Now, the caveat to that, and why it's still a fair point to speak of it as a leak rather than confirmed, is that sometimes clubs will encourage the design of what is often called a concept kit, and then they will see how the market responds, and that allows them to essentially define whether that locked design, especially if it's a new color scheme for a club, is a prudent approach. And you can certainly understand why Newcastle, rather than say, we'd like these colors, ask their fans, have the fan base probably confirm, yes, let's have that connection, and then make it very public. You can kind of empathize with why they wouldn't take that approach. And also there has to be a secrecy to some extent where you stress test the market if you choose to do that approach before you release it via whispers. And that's because of commercial obligations. It's also due to the fact that Newcastle will want to be able to launch it officially. They need to obviously confirm the sponsor on the front, and naturally they'll want assets through which they can promote it with. So the process, just so people understand, of launching a kit will be to make a few designs, sometimes using third parties. Some of them maybe get leaked. Often that's on purpose to see what the market thinks. And then you will go usually to your players and you'll take some photographs and some videos and you'll stick your sponsor on, and that will all stay relatively protected and secret, especially because at the moment, the understanding is that Newcastle will try and get out of their existing sponsorship deal and put a new Saudi-led sponsor on the front of the shirt. So that's probably why you have the secrecy. But most of the media have been told that that kit is legitimate. So it's not just a case of only reacting to a leak. Any good journalist will then go to their sources and confirm whether or not Newcastle United do intend to release that as one of their kits next season. And that has been effectively confirmed that that is the colour scheme and that is the, in inverted commas, design. And I say in inverted commas design only because that kit is not complete. So we don't know what the sponsor is going to be. We don't know what the back is going to be. We don't know what the shorts are going to be. We don't know what the socks are going to be. So there's still an element of fluidity, but most football clubs will have their kits sorted for next season already. So that is seen to be a printed version, but lacking the sponsor and the rest of the kit. So then if you look at that context, you can therefore understand why reputable publications are talking about that as a Newcastle kit next season, because they've used the leak to make the calls and ultimately believe that they're not dealing with speculation. So then why is it such a big deal? And there's two schools of thought. One is it's just a kit. Two is it's a kit with meaning. And my belief is that all football kits have meaning, but then you can again split your line of argument and say, does it matter if it has meaning? Why can't that meaning be positive? Newcastle are owned by Saudi Arabians. What's wrong with them adopting that color scheme? They've had a white and green kit before. It's only a third kit. Other clubs do it. All of those arguments will be thrown into the mix. And if we sort of start with that perspective and delve into it a little bit, You could argue that from a business point of view, it's very savvy because Newcastle will sell a ton of shirts in Saudi Arabia. You could argue, why shouldn't the football club have a connection with their ownership group? And you can argue that the majority of the fan base that are Newcastle United supporters that might actually buy the thing seem to be okay with it. And when consulting and collaborating on what colours and what style you're going to wear, if the fan base is happy, then the football club, to some extent, is doing its job. And I kind of put all of that out there first, just so those listening understand that I hear those points and I'm in no way dismissing or disrespecting them. From my perspective, the big issue and the counter side of the argument is that Newcastle spent so long trying to argue a separation between PIF and the Saudi Arabian government. And then within months, they release a kit that is so remarkably close to the Saudi Arabian national team kit that it is obvious, even without explanation, that it's been done to mimic the Saudi kit and tie the black and white in Newcastle with the white and green of Saudi Arabia. And again, there'll be fans listening that say, well, what's the problem with that? You can't have a Saudi-based owner and not have that connection. So why not do it through the kit? And again, I consider that point. I respect that point. And I'm in no way dismissing that point. My problem with it that makes me feel uncomfortable is just that the white and green kit, for me, not only comes from PIF and Yasser Al-Rumayyan, but because it's so similar to the Saudi football kit, will, in my opinion, have had collaboration through sources outside of Newcastle as well. Because I know from my time in the Middle East, and specifically Saudi Arabia, having collaborated with that football federation before, that when they design their kits, they get signed off every aspect, even the really minute details, through the Saudi Football Federation. The Saudi Football Federation has government representation. And when they decide on the color scheme and the design, for example, what they wear for Qatar 2022, it goes through the president of the Saudi Football Federation, then it goes through the government, and then it gets signed off. So the Saudi kit is effectively signed off by the government. The Newcastle kit mimics that Saudi Arabian kit. And the question we don't know the answer to is, did anyone beyond Yasser Al-Rumayyan or Newcastle United, therefore, sign off Newcastle wearing in those colours, or have Newcastle got free rein to just determine that that is a fair connection to have? And it wouldn't remotely surprise me if you can't just mimic the Saudi Arabian football kit and do so without asking somebody within government if it's okay. But that is a hypothetical question. So I raise that again out of context because my ask is only that Newcastle explain the backstory of the kit. So it's not so much that it's good or bad. I'm not particularly bothered by it in the sense of the actual colours. I'm just uncomfortable with it because it's so soon after the ownership group have taken over. It's so similar to the Saudi Arabian kit. There is a strong possibility that there has been some kind of consultation or sign off to mimic it this closely, especially with different manufacturers making it from somebody senior in Saudi Arabia, potentially even government. But even if that's not the case, I would like Newcastle United to explain it. So then when people talk about hypocrisy and double standards and why other clubs can do it and there's no scrutiny and why Newcastle get all of this backlash, I think the short answer is that usually a football club, and Newcastle might do this in fairness to them, will release the backstory behind the kit. So if we go to the question that reference different clubs that have done it as well, the Chelsea one that appears to have the Russian flag on the sleeves, the whole backstory of that is about 1960s Kings Road culture and the vibe and the look and the feel. And Chelsea did a video and a big explanation as to why they'd done that. And of course, you can still argue that the colours make the Russian flag, and that may be intentional. But the whole backstory was 1960s Kings Road, and Chelsea explained that. If you look at PSG, their primary colours are blue and red. And yes, the kit that I've seen and been sent countless times on Twitter does have an element of maroon, but it isn't identical to the colour on the Qatar flag. There's not an actual Qatar flag on that kit. And it was made, as per their explanation, as part of the collaboration with Jordan. And PSG have got a whole range in kind of pinky purple and, yes, maroon. And of course, that colour scheme lends itself to their Qatari ownership as well. If you look at the Leicester one I've been sent, it wasn't actually a kit. So it's worth clarifying that as well, that the red Thailand one that a number of people have sent me on Twitter is nothing to do with Leicester City Football Club. It was never a kit at all. It was made by a concept designer. The club had no role in it, no say in it, and it was not produced. And then the darker one that people have sent me that Leicester did wear is the season before Thailand's national football team wore that kit. So there's no way that Leicester could have mimicked that kit. If anything, it's the other way around. So it's like saying Saudi Arabia are going to turn up to Qatar wearing black and white. So the other clubs that have been referenced are not necessarily like for like to Newcastle. Sheffield United can be thrown in there, and I absolutely think that there's an element of the other Saudi kit to the green one that I've been sent. It's definitely a Saudi green, but I have no real issue with a football club adopting a colour scheme of their ownership group. I think it's just in this specific case, it's Newcastle. They were seen in the build-up to the takeover to be so closely tied to the Saudi Arabian government. The Saudi Arabian government have a say in the colour schemes of all of their sports teams, including the football team. And Newcastle, within months, at the request of Yasser Al-Rumayyan, with consultation with who, and that's the big question, suddenly mimic almost exactly a Saudi national team shirt. And for me, that doesn't quite sit right. And to see Newcastle turn out in those colours will feel a little bit sports washing to me personally. From a business point of view, they'll sell a ton of shirts. It will do well in Saudi Arabia. That's kind of the point. So I think that I understand the counter argument and I agree with some of the points that are being raised. But the big things I disagree with that I want to make clear are, one, just because other clubs do it, ... is not a counter argument. You have to justify your own club's position based on the current climate and their own decisions. You can't just say, but Manchester City break the rules, so why can't Newcastle? But Leicester produced this kit, why can't Newcastle? You have to have your own morality, for want of a better word, around your own football club. So I think that that's the first point. And then the second point is just that, like any other kit, Newcastle should explain the backstory. And if they do so and it's compelling and it's engaging, and hopefully they will when they launch it, then end of conversation, because they've said why they've given you their logic. But make no mistake, colours matter. And that's the other thing, that when people tell me, oh, it's just a third kit, it's just fashion, colours don't matter. What if Newcastle released a third kit that was red and white stripes? Then suddenly colours would matter. So if you believe colours matter, if they were red and white as the third kit, then white and green matter. They can matter positively or negatively. But anyone saying they're just colours is missing the point, because I think we can all, or most of us can accept that that is a Saudi-themed kit. So if you accept it's a Saudi-themed kit, then you also surely agree that colours matter. You can like those colours or dislike those colours. You can feel they have a connection with Newcastle or they don't have a connection with Newcastle. You can feel the media are being over the top, or you can feel that the media are shedding a limelight and we're having a debate over it. So both sides are fair in many ways, because it's up to the individual, and ultimately it's Newcastle fans buying it. So your views are more important than mine because you're the target market. But to just say, it's just a kit, it's just a fashion statement, the colours mean nothing, that for me misses the point.
I think the big problem is, unfortunately, that some journalists throughout the whole takeover debacle, I'll call it, crossed paths with Newcastle fans on social media, and I think it's a fact that it's come, the story in a negative way has come from those people, and I think you're right, you make some really valid points, and that's why I wanted to ask you about it. And look, it'll run and run. We'll have to wait and see whether it does come out as a third kit. I loved your theory on the fact that if it was red and white stripes, then we would have an issue with it, and that's a great counter argument. I just think it's sometimes the way that it's put across by certain people in the media, and once again, I don't like to name these people. I think it's all very obvious who these people are. However, I think that's the problem, and I think we'll move on. We'll see. Maybe Newcastle will come out with a third kit, which is green and white. Maybe they won't. Maybe they will come out with an explanation. If they do come out with a third kit, maybe they won't. But it's definitely one that we'll watch with interest over the summer, and it should be an interesting one. I'm going to change tack now and change topics, and this one is something we've discussed already on NUFC Matters this week, but one which I'm really interested in your opinion on, Ben, and that is Mark Clattenburg coming out with this suggestion that football should introduce 60-minute matches with a stop clock. That way, every game would last the same length, and we get rid of the time wasting. So, time wasting has become a big issue in the game. It's been there for a long time. I mean, we all know the situation. You're winning 1-0. You've got a couple of minutes to go. You maybe run down the corner flag and mess around down there, or you fall down and you bring a substitute on, and we know what it's all about. But this theory from Mark Clattenburg seems to stem from the fact that the average time that the ball has been in play over the last few seasons is varied between 59 minutes, 60 minutes, 61 minutes, and he's come up with this theory that maybe you should do that. Is this going more towards an American style of spectator sport, Ben? Is it a good idea or is it a bad idea from your perspective?
I think it certainly goes into that American territory, doesn't it? But it's also just modern life, that football has almost archaic elements at times, and timekeeping is one of them. So if we just take a step back from the 60-minute Clattenburg plan and think about timekeeping, do we need a referee to still be in charge of the time with a watch, or could we have a digital clock? And might that be a bit more accurate? I was at the Wolves game yesterday against Norwich, for example, and 1 minute minimum went up of added time, and the referee played 16 seconds. So there is obviously a discrepancy at times between those on the touchline, those up in VAR, television clocks, and referees' clocks. And when we get to added time, we never actually see the referee's watch. So that's why people often ask this: when you hit 90 and you're in a football stadium, even though your television clock will continue ticking, your football scoreboard has to stop at 90. It can't keep timing it, just in case there is a discrepancy between the referee's watch and the scoreboard watch. And they obviously don't want a scenario where fans start calling out the timekeeping. So I'm a firm believer in accurate timekeeping. But with the 60-minute games, Clattenburg's issue is around time wasting of the ball leaving the football field rather than time wasting within the game. So if you reduce a football match to 60 played minutes, then what you are doing is guaranteeing that the ball is actually going to be moving and on the football field for 60 minutes. But what you can't guarantee is if people are still going to actually time waste and find a way to whittle down the clock. You just know that they're not going to be able to do it via kicking the ball out of play and then taking an age to take a throw in. And one presumes with his plan that the clock will start on the whistle, so you can't kind of delay and have gamesmanship around a free kick and anything like that. So in theory, it makes the game more economical. But in practice, 60 minutes feels very arbitrary to me, because it's based at the moment on how long the ball is currently in play, because around a third of every single game gets wasted with the ball going out of play. And what we actually need to know is, what's the optimum time? Why does it have to be 60 minutes? Why can't you play 90 minutes with the ball in play, and then that's going to add an extra half an hour or so to your overall football experience? And I think if we consult with players to establish whether 60 minutes is the right number or more, then I would be okay with a clock stopping when the ball goes out of play, providing, and here's where your point about America comes in, and there needs to be a differentiation, we're not using the stoppages for new commercial fan engagement-y things. And I'm a little bit of a hypocrite here because I'm all for halftime being utilized in a more dynamic way, where fans get value for their money, whether that's through shows or entertainment. But what I don't want is every time a throw-in goes out, or every time you get on 15 minutes exactly an opportunity instead of a drinks break to have a timeout or to have an advertising break. And that's my worry, that if you regiment the time so strictly that you know exactly when you're going to get pauses or halfway points in games, it will lend itself more, in my opinion, towards that Americanized style of match presentation. And it is the continuous flow of football that I think we all love. My other concern, which is why I'd like maybe to see 90 minutes in play rather than 60 minutes, as long as the players feel that that extra time that they'd actually be on the field in action allows them to function without wearing them out, without picking up injuries. And we don't really know, because we think of football as 90 minutes already. So saying it's 90 minutes in play, what's the exact difference? And how much more will players do in each position? Are they going to be more tired? Do you need the 5 subs always, indefinitely? Or are there other tweaks to the game? And we have to evolve the game. Arsene Wenger's automatic offsides is another good idea because it adds speed to the game. So anything kind of digital around that, timekeeping, automatic offsides, I think is a really good thing. But we can't make football so robotic and, as Clattenburg kind of put it, even, that we take the kind of chance away from it. So actually what I love about football, in a counterpoint to that, is the fact that no football game is an even amount of time in play. I love the fact that a team chasing a goal will get a throw in and the ball will be hoofed into Rose Ed and they'll sprint over to take it. And the other team will kind of amble over and take their time with their substitutions. These are the tactics of the game. So time wasting can be frustrating, but when your side's doing it, it's also tactical. It's a way of slowing down the game. And more importantly, you don't want to know that you've got only a bang on 60 minutes when you've come from a 90-minute game. So in a 90-minute game, if it's in play for 60, if you keep possession, if you have urgency, if you control the game, you might get 75 minutes of the ball in play. And if you're parking the bus away from home and you're constantly slowing down the game, you might stop a good team having that much of the ball because you only have it in play for 45 minutes. So that ability to manipulate probably evens the playing field a little bit. And if everything was just guaranteed 60 minutes in play, then maybe the better teams, knowing they've always got that time, home or away, regardless of circumstance, could also have an advantage. So those are the kind of thoughts running through my head. But I think it's not a bad idea in theory, but there's no need to arbitrarily say it's 60 minutes just because it's only in play at the moment for around 60 minutes. I think it needs a bit more consultation with players and managers and fans to determine what's safe, what the right amount of time is. But as a bottom line reaction, in a very superficial way, I think it does make sense to take the timekeeping away from a referee and make it transparent and make it kind of there for everybody to see, because the referee's watch, the referee's whistle, even the assistant's flag, these are all very archaic in the digital age. And that, again, is why I think that digital timekeeping that is transparent and Wenger's automatic offsides are probably the future of the game. But the specifics need to be discussed with everyone first.
Yeah, I would agree. Big thanks to our sponsors. As always, Spider Miner Worldwide Coverage, the only cryptocurrency that can mine 5 different cryptocurrencies at the same time, whilst using virtually no energy, and it's VPN protected. Buy yours now at www.miner.spidervpn.com. Thanks also to skipsandbins.com, telephone 0800 25 45 25 3, email inquiries at skipsandbins.com, website www.skipsandbins.com. Easy contract, free and pay-as-you-go waste collection. Thanks to L&G Family Funeral Directors, 01913897245, and a Garden of Healing Dispensary, CBD hemp and cannabinoid specialists, www.thegohd.com. Thanks also to qtechshop.co.uk, the makers of pool tables and snooker tables in Wallsend, Newcastle, and the guys who run our website, NUFCmatters.com. And thanks to Cleakai, meet the new Game Over screen, drop into a ClearRun device near you, available on Apple Store, Google Play, and clearrun.game. Thanks to Media Arts for all help with video content. If you want to subscribe, hit the Newcastle Legends logo in the bottom right-hand corner, and you can subscribe for free. Hit the thumb up to like the video, click share to share to your social media, and drop into the comments box to speak to like-minded Newcastle fans. We do 7 shows a week and a little bit more besides. We're also available on iTunes, Spotify, Podbean, and the rest usually goes up 24 hours after the show has finished. And if you want to become a member, you can either click join on YouTube or you can go to NUFCmatters.com. What do you get if you join via the website? Well, you get a cup, you get a membership card, a scarf, and entry into the free prize draw. And if you put your smartphone over the top of the QR code, it'll take you straight to that segment on the website. And if you do subscribe to the channel, we do throw you a free car sticker. You just have to email John. Don't forget, tonight Newcastle play Arsenal, and Malcolm MacDonald will be at the Dog and Parrot pre-match and post-match. Pre-match, you'll be there from about 5:30. Post-match, you'll be there from about 10:15. Kids are welcome pre-match. Good beer, good food at the Dog and Parrot, just up from Central Station and across the road from the Centre for Life. Don't forget as well, we do support the food bank, NUFC fans, foodbank.co.uk. The virtual bucket is there. You can donate to that 365 days of the year. And the guys and girls will be across the road from Shearer's Bar doing what they do best for the final home game of the season tonight against Arsenal. So make sure you pop up and take them some donations. We're also doing an end of season do. NUFC Matters presents Mick Lowes and Andy Griffin at Shearer's Bar, Friday the 24th of June. Tickets are £12. And you can get them from the website, NUFCmatters.com. And we have got the Alan Shearer Ball still ticking over. 99 tickets available at $2.99 a ticket. Get yourself onto the website, NUFCmatters.com, to win a piece of history. This was from the 260 dinner, signed by Alan. Only 260 of those exist. And with Father's Day looming next month, might be a nice idea for you to have a little bit of a flutter and get yourself an opportunity to win a piece of history. Okay, we'll come to some of your questions now, of which there's a few. Let's pick one out. Question for Ben from Tom Dixon. He says, with a week to go, who do you think will get relegated out of Burnley, Leeds and Everton? What a day yesterday. I mean, some great games at the top and bottom of the table, Ben.
Unbelievable. I mean, the race to stay up is just crazy. And Leeds were in free fall, but then they get a 90+2 equaliser. And now you start to worry about Burnley again. I think Everton will be okay, even though they lost dramatically yesterday. And the reason for that is because they've got home to Crystal Palace next, and I see them winning that game. From Burnley's perspective, they were unlucky in some respects against Spurs. It was a controversial penalty. They dug in, they made the game very difficult for Tottenham, but they leave empty-handed. And now they've got to go and get something, I think, against Aston Villa. And then, of course, Newcastle on the final game of the season, which at home, and with Newcastle potentially having nothing massive to play for, should actually be okay for them on paper. But Newcastle have improved on the road. And are they going to be favourites to win that? Absolutely, by no means. But the last game of the season is kind of a very odd bag for teams that don't have a great deal to play for. They chop and change, they try new things. So that could play into Burnley's advantage, especially, as I say, with the fact that they're at home. And then from Leeds' perspective, the point that they got was absolutely massive, because if they lost that, not only are you crushed at home against Brighton, but they would have been in the relegation zone. and they've played a game more than everybody else. So their last opportunity to get any points is away at Brentford. And if they started in the relegation zone going to Brentford, I think they would be in big, big trouble. However, prefacing it like that, I still think it's Leeds that are going down, because I fancy Burnley to get a draw at Aston Villa. And I think that Everton will beat Crystal Palace, so they're safe. So then it becomes between Burnley and Leeds. And Leeds' goal difference is dreadful compared to Burnley's. And I can see the two sides finishing on the same amount of points. So I'm going to go with a Burnley draw against Aston Villa, and only because I'm on your podcast, a Newcastle win at Turf Moor. And I think Leeds will draw with Brentford on the final day. So then that actually, by the maths, would have Burnley down, not Leeds down. For some reason in my head, I think Leeds will go down. So if Leeds are to go down, then either Burnley will also draw with Newcastle. I'm going against the win that I've given Newcastle. Final prediction is going to be Burnley draw their final two games. So I am taking 2 points away from you, Newcastle, sorry, but only because I kind of want Leeds to go down. And I think Leeds draw with Brentford on the final day. And that's what decides the relegation. They finish on equal points, and then Leeds end up going down on goal difference. At the top, ridiculous West Ham Manchester City game. I mean, City are just showing both vulnerability, which we also saw in the Champions League, and also their class. And even though Mahrez missed that penalty, the point is just so vital, because if they hadn't got that, you could absolutely see Liverpool putting 3, 4, 5 past Southampton. And then you go into the final game of the season and it could all come down to goal difference. Liverpool will beat Southampton for me. And then they've got what's actually proven to be quite a poor Wolves team in the back end of the season. So I believe they'll beat Wolves at home too. So they take maximum points for me. And then Manchester City obviously need to win their last game. What a story that is, because they've got Steven Gerrard's Aston Villa, Liverpool legend. So that's set up nicely as well. And I think Manchester City, unfortunately for Liverpool, because I would like to see Liverpool do the quadruple. It's a great football club, brilliant philosophy. One of my good friends, Baz Hunter, is down there as their chief scout, and he's doing a brilliant job. Klopp, you only had to see him in the FA Cup final. The way that he handled that penalty shootout compared to Thomas Tuchel with so much warmth and energy, and he relaxed his football team before a big moment. And even though people say penalties are pot luck, I think it's no coincidence that Liverpool have beaten Chelsea twice on a penalty shootout, and Klopp's energy and the way he takes pressure off his players in that moment is a big part of that. So I'd like to see Liverpool win it, but I think Manchester City will beat Aston Villa and win the Premier League. But had they lost to West Ham, it wouldn't have at all surprised me if Liverpool found a few goals and ended up sneaking it on goal difference. And then, of course, the race for top four equally is bonkers, because now Arsenal need to beat Newcastle, otherwise it's out of their hands. And going to St James's Park at the moment, when you need a win to put yourself in control of Champions League, is the worst possible fixture due to the crowd, the energy, the form, and now the freedom that Newcastle can play, because they've only really got a top half finish to kind of fight for. And in the bigger picture, other than prize money and a little bit of kudos, that doesn't really matter. So I would not like to be Arsenal this evening. I can't think of a worse away day when you need all 3 points. And it wouldn't at all surprise me if Newcastle get something from the game and Tottenham have the advantage going into the final day.
Yeah, it's going to be excellent last day. It really is. Everything to play for, and looking forward to my trip down to Burnley. Looking forward to tonight's game as well. This is an interesting one, because I've just seen this from Gary Milligan. He says, "Morning, Stephen Ben. What's Ben's views of Schmeichel joining a big club like Newcastle?" Now, we are going to be doing the transfer show with yourself starting in June. We'll have to pick and choose what days, because we're both quite busy. But once a week, we'll be looking at trying to separate the wheat from the chaff of players that Newcastle are linked with. This is an early one. Schmeichel to Newcastle, is that something you've heard? Is it something you would be bothered about? I mean, he's getting towards the end of his career. Newcastle are in the market, I think, for a keeper to at least challenge Dubravka, to give him a bit of competition, because at the moment he doesn't really have any.
Yeah, and I think that was the logic, wasn't it, of bringing in Henderson as well in the last transfer window. I don't think there's anything in a Schmeichel to Newcastle move. I think that, as you say, you've got a 35-year-old goalkeeper, but mentality-wise, he still sees himself as playing week in, week out as a number one somewhere. And I don't believe Newcastle's strategy would be to sign a number one goalkeeper that's 35 years of age. He is a brilliant shot stopper. He's a big dressing room influence. 3 or 4 years ago, he was being linked with Manchester United, but he's actually the kind of character that's very frosty about talking about his dad. He's getting better the more media training he's doing, but he's never liked those comparisons. And I think that put him off going to Manchester United when he had the opportunity. And I just don't see him wanting to necessarily, even for potentially big money, go to a football club in his current state and be a number two goalkeeper. And I'm not overly convinced that Newcastle would be signing Kasper Schmeichel as a number one goalkeeper. And it's interesting with his career because when he was really young, he was at Manchester City and he was there under Sven-Göran Eriksson, and the other goalkeeper at the time was Joe Hart. And I remember talking to Sven, and he basically said, honestly, there was absolutely nothing between the two goalkeepers, but I picked Joe Hart because Joe Hart was English. And Schmeichel, as a result, was unable to really force himself into the mix. I think he only played a handful of games, and he had to kind of be loaned out through the whole football pyramid. He played at Coventry, at Cardiff, a couple of games for Darlington, for Bury as well. Then he went to Notts County, had a short spell at Leeds, and joined Leicester. And that decision to pick Hart over him, even though technically and potential-wise, Sven had said they were basically the same, sort of forced him all the way down the football pyramid. And then since 2011, he's come all the way back up with Leicester and he's won the Premier League. And in doing so, he has stabilised himself. And as a character, even though he's very confident, very eloquent, a big dressing room influence, he values that stability. And that's why I think that he will probably not want to be a sit on the bench goalkeeper. His next season, whether at Leicester or anywhere else, he'll want to be a number one. And it wouldn't remotely surprise me, much like Peter Schmeichel, his dad, if he retires a little bit earlier than some goalkeepers and doesn't go down that route of kind of being 40, 41, 42, 43 and just sitting on a bench. Like, for example, Mark Schwarzer did when he was at Leicester. Some like it because you're training every day, you're playing in cup games, you're playing for reserve teams, but others feel like they're just delaying an inevitable retirement and they want to get on with their life and do something else. And I think Schmeichel definitely falls into the latter category. So I think that he'll see himself as playing until, as a number one goalkeeper, 37, in my opinion, from talking to people around Leicester City Football Club. So let's call that, I would say, 1 to 2 seasons, because he's 35 at the moment, but his birthday's in November. So he's actually 36 effectively by the time the bulk of next season is underway. So he's got 1 to 2 seasons at his peak. Are Newcastle United going to come in for a 35, 36-year-old goalkeeper that openly says he wants to play number one and doesn't want to sit on a bench, even if that's for a good payday? And I think that the answer is no. I don't see how having that strategy, and I don't think that that improves upon the Dubravka situation. So Newcastle have looked, as I hear it, at Schmeichel loosely, in the sense that every scout makes a list of who might be available. And the feeling is that Schmeichel might be available because Leicester themselves are thinking about who Schmeichel's replacement might be. But as soon as they've got wind of the fact that he's not a player that will just come and predominantly sit on a bench behind another goalkeeper, that's put them off the transfer. And at this stage, I don't think there's any substance to it.
Bit of a ghost story, as somebody has said in the chat. I would agree. JJ is saying, have Everton breached financial fair play and will the points deduction kick in? I mean, it looks as if that's just been completely bypassed and forgotten about.
Yeah, I think that the Everton financial fair play is difficult because the longer it gets investigated and the numbers get tallied up, the more likely, as we're definitely now going to see, the season will end And then unfortunately, it either gets bypassed, forgotten about, or you punish retrospectively. And then if there's a points deduction, it can't be done into this current season if they've not even determined what they're going to do with it by the time the season ends. So they're in absolutely no problems as far as this season is concerned, whether rightly or wrongly. And the thing to understand about why that is the case, even though a lot of fans will say they've cheated and they're in breach of it, is that the rules, and we're calling it financial fair play, but the key here is actually the Premier League's version of financial fair play, which is called profit and sustainability rules. And in 2020, due to COVID, the Premier League relaxed their profit and sustainability rules, and that allowed football clubs to offset losses of up to 250 million. And that's compared to the regular amount, which is more around 90 million. And because of that, Everton are confident that they'll avoid any penalty, even though they've now posted these huge losses for 3 years in a row. So I'm simplifying it, but the debate is basically they've posted big losses that are clearly in breach of the profit and sustainability rules for 3 years running. They should be punished. And that can entail a points deduction. But when you add COVID to the mix and the relaxation of those rules, it becomes more of a grey area that is likely to result in them getting away with it. But make no mistake, Everton posted a loss in their annual accounts at the end of June of last year of about 120 million quid. And over the last 3 years, their losses have been in excess of 350 million and even creeping more towards 400 million. And the Premier League's profit and sustainability rules allow an adjusted loss of 105 million over a 3-year period. So if you fail to comply with that, then you get sanctions, and that can include a points deduction. But as I say, it's not open and shut because of COVID. So in September 2020, the Premier League very quietly amended all of these numbers and allowed clubs to argue that COVID had created increased losses. And because of that, they needed more flexibility. So now, due to COVID, the league's calculations, when they're looking at what constitutes a loss, don't include things like infrastructure costs, spending around women's football, youth development costs, community development programming costs, and most importantly, COVID losses for 2019 and 2020. And they're known as, I think the official term is add backs. So you take your total loss on paper, which sees Everton miles over the threshold and thus sanctions and possible points deductions. But then you take all those areas of costs over 19, 20 and 2021 and you add them back, which means that on paper for your books, you've made a loss, but on paper for your profit and sustainability, you can deduct them and it doesn't count towards your loss. And Everton's belief is that when all of these numbers are added up, inclusive of the add backs due to the COVID relaxation, they are within the Premier League's profit and sustainability rules. And that does appear to be the case. But it also allows them to be quite creative with how they're listing a loss, because they're the ones in control of their submission and their books. And the Premier League can, of course, ask questions, but how can you categorically say what is a COVID loss if you're talking about gate receipts? You could argue that you have to take an average gate receipt from before COVID and call that your medium and then times that by your ticket prices. But you can also say, well, that was a really big game for Everton Football Club. And if we didn't have COVID, we were over the Christmas period going to raise our prices. So we're now going to factor a 40,000 seater stadium. We think it would have sold out over Christmas because it's a Christmas fixture. And we were going to raise the price of hospitality and regular tickets from £30 a ticket to £50 a ticket. And as long as you've got your paper trail around the time saying that's what you plan to do, and if you know that you might have been in breach of the profit and sustainability rules and then you are aware that they're going to be relaxed, you may choose to put that on paper, or you may be legitimate in the fact that you believe you could have commercialized certain games, like a Merseyside derby as well. So then again, you can say, I want more deducted off the add-on because we actually plan to raise our prices. You can say the same with the season ticket launch, that we were going to, as most clubs would do, up our season ticket prices between 1920 and 2021. But then we had to freeze them because we didn't even know whether we could sell them, and we were unaware whether fans could be in the stadium. So then you can project an inflated price onto the forthcoming season between 1920 and 2021, and again, deduct more from profit and sustainability. So creative bookkeeping plus the relaxed financial fair play rules probably do mean that Everton are not actually in breach, even though when you just look at the cumulative losses over 3 years, it does appear to be the case. And as a consequence, at best for Everton, they're fine. And at worst for Everton, if they are slightly above the threshold, they're only going to get sanctions, which is at the Premier League's discretion. I don't think there's any scenario, especially since COVID has hit, where Everton will get a points deduction.
Yeah, okay. Just a quick one on this. Geordie Toonville says, Ben, will Leicester get rid of those ridiculous clappers? That's not true, football supporters. Use your bloody hands, he says.
Do you know what? I hope so. I absolutely hate them. There's two things I hate in football: the vuvuzela from the South Africa and the clapper. And, you know, it's also because, without going into any real detail, I'm just going to kind of say it and move on. But I'm really a fan of football clubs being not just socially conscious, but environmentally conscious. So I don't see the need to leave a clapper on 30-odd thousand seats. I think that's ultimately a waste of production. When, as you say, if you clap your hands, that's more environmentally conscious. But it was done during the Premier League season to create atmosphere. And it was so loud with the clappers when the team came out. And everyone at Leicester absolutely loved it when the team came out. And it created a roar, and it allowed everyone to have something on their seat. And the late owner used to also, when Leicester were doing well, leave things like a beer voucher and a pie voucher. So the seats can be used effectively to create atmosphere or generate fan engagement, but they're just annoying, and nobody at large anyway keeps them. So then they get chucked away, and they're in everyone's way, and they're irritating, and you can leave with a headache. I suppose it's just me getting into my 30s and becoming old. But yes, I would love to see Leicester get rid of the clappers.
There we go. Okay, Newcastle, of course, play Arsenal tonight, live on Sky, 8 o'clock kickoff. Game's sold out. Don't forget, huge fan flag display by War Flags again, and that takes place 10 minutes before the game, and there will be one after the game as well. Please don't take the flags home with you. Quick prediction on that game, mate. You've already said it's a big game for Arsenal.
Yeah, and I think it's a big game for Newcastle. The way the season has fallen, because you got safe so early, you had this run where you can almost test yourself against the teams that the plan anyway is to compete against next season, and get a real sense of what this squad can do compared to what you may need over the summer. And both Manchester City and Liverpool were disappointing, even though the scorelines were very different. 1-0 flattered, I think, Newcastle against Liverpool, and there was a much bigger gap between the two sides. And then Manchester City, as they've done all season, dismantled most teams, and that included Newcastle. But Arsenal's that step down. And, you know, if Newcastle right now are to carry this momentum of the second half of the season forwards and be a top four contender, then they need to gauge themselves against an Arsenal side where there's everything at stake. And rather than thinking about this as a game that there's not much at stake for Newcastle, I think they almost want to treat this like I know it sounds a bit bizarre to say and perverse, but treat the game like you're Spurs. Pretend in your own mentality that you're Tottenham Hotspur and it's a do or die game for Champions League football. It's a winner takes all game. Of course, that's hard for a footballer because it isn't. And that's why what I'm saying is hypothetical and a bit ridiculous. But I'd like to see Newcastle go out there and treat this like a game in which they can make a statement for next season. And if they do that and play to their ability at St. James's Park, they will win the game, in my opinion, 2-1, because Arsenal are wobbly. And, you know, they showed that in the North London derby, but they also showed that against Leeds United, where they couldn't kill off a game, even though Leeds had an early red card. And even though they won 2-1, they were absolutely dreadful after Leeds went down to 10 men. And if Newcastle get under their skin, play with intensity, the crowd have got a part to play in that as well. I think Arsenal will wobble and Newcastle will win the game 2-1. But I absolutely think whatever happens, however Arsenal play, Newcastle don't lose tonight. So draw or win, they have an impact on the race for Champions League football, and they put the fate in Tottenham's hands. And it'd be really interesting because it's everything at stake for Arsenal. It's do or die, and it's nothing at stake for Newcastle. But there's still players there that are, when Newcastle add 4 or 5 potentially over the summer, going to fall from starting 11 to bit part players, or bit part players to being sold. So if you're in that category in this Newcastle United squad, you have to show Eddie Howe on a game like tonight that you can beat a Champions League contender, that you can win a big occasion game that might, for Newcastle, when it's a repeat fixture next season, be in the race for 4th or better. And there's a variety of players in that Newcastle squad. Almiron is a good example, I think, who, if he starts, is exactly the kind of player that needs to show Eddie Howe, and he's had a bit of a resurgence and he's scored a goal of the month, but that type of player, not just him, but that type of player needs to show Eddie Howe tonight that as Newcastle elevate and move in the right direction, he is the right type of player. He is good enough to be in a side challenging for the Champions League. And that's why tonight's important for Newcastle to make that statement. And I believe they will. And I think that will be through a combination of Newcastle realising that they can be part of the occasion and Arsenal being Arsenal away from home and having a wobble. So my prediction is a 2-1 Newcastle win.
Fantastic. As always, great stuff. And Rachel says, great show as always. Don't forget to hit the like, subscribe if you haven't already. Thank you, Rachel. Thanks to all the moderators. Big thanks to Ben. Looking forward to getting you on. We'll do a season review next week, Ben. I'll be in touch and sort a day out with you. But as always, Ben, safe travels, mate. Take care and enjoy the Wolves game tonight.
Can I just say, Steve, as well, before I go, that I know you won't want to go into this on air, but it's been a difficult week for you and it will be a difficult few days. And I obviously just want to say my personal condolences, but I also just want to put out there to the fan base listening that Steve continues to do these shows. He continues to put on a brave face. He continues to present with humor and dignity and professionalism as he always does. And Twitter can be a horrible place sometimes. And I hope, therefore, that the fan base, without going into any detail and without making a thing of it, I hope this fan base appreciates Steve and rallies round him, because after the game tonight, it is going to be a difficult week, and it has been a few difficult weeks. So just want to finish the show, Steve, by, again, sending my condolences, wishing you all the best and reminding you of what a good job you do on here.
Thanks very much, mate. Take care. Have a great night tonight. Thank you, Ben.